Long before the banknotes became worthless, before prices changed by the hour, Venezuela looked like the exception. In the middle of the 20th century, it was one of the richest countries on earth. By the 1950s, Venezuela's oil reserves were the envy of the world. The country was the largest oil exporter on the planet, supplying energy to a rebuilding Europe and a rapidly industrializing United States. Caracas was not a cautionary tale. It was a destination. Skyscrapers rose from former farmland. Imported cars filled wide boulevards. The bolivar, Venezuela's currency, was so stable it earned a nickname, the Saudi Rial of Latin America. For decades, one bolivar was worth more than $1. This wasn't luck. Oil money transformed Venezuela almost overnight. Foreign companies poured in, government revenues surged, infrastructure expanded at a pace most developing nations could only dream of. Public education improved, subsidies kept food and fuel cheap. A growing middle class believed it had arrived, permanently. But here's where the pattern begins. Venezuela's prosperity rested on a single pillar. Oil accounted for more than 90% of export earnings. Nearly all foreign currency came from crude flowing out of the ground. As long as oil prices remained high, the system appeared stable. As long as dollars kept coming in, the bolivar held its value. This is stage one of the pattern: concentrated prosperity, extraordinary wealth from a narrow source. And at first it works beautifully. By the 1970s, oil prices exploded. After the 1973 oil shock, Venezuela's government revenue doubled almost overnight. The state expanded rapidly, public sector jobs multiplied, subsidies grew more generous, politicians promised that oil wealth would fund development forever. One Venezuelan finance minister famously declared, "We are drowning in money." But prosperity can hide fragility. The government spent as if oil revenues would never fall. Imports surged because it was easier to buy food abroad than invest in domestic agriculture. Local industries struggled to compete with cheap foreign goods. Over time, Venezuela produced less and consumed more, paid for by oil dollars. This is stage two, dependency masked as stability. As long as oil prices stayed high, no one asked hard questions. Then came the first crack. In the early 1980s, global oil prices collapsed. Venezuela's export revenues fell sharply, but government spending did not. Instead of adjusting, leaders borrowed, foreign debt rose, reserves shrank. The bolivar, once unshakable, came under pressure. On February 18, 1983, the illusion finally broke. The government devalued the bolivar for the first time in modern history. The day became known as Black Friday. Overnight, Venezuelans realized something fundamental had changed. Imported goods doubled in price, savings lost value instantly, confidence cracked. Yet the system did not collapse, yet. This is stage three, denial and delay. Rather than restructuring the economy, leaders tried to restore the old normal. Currency controls were introduced, exchange rates were fixed, dollars were rationed. Officially, the bolivar was stable. Unofficially, a black market formed immediately. And whenever controls tighten, incentives distort. Those with political connections gained access to cheap official dollars. They resold them for profit. Corruption flourished. Capital quietly fled the country. The middle class watched purchasing power erode while being told stability had returned. Sound familiar? By the 1990s, Venezuela faced rising inequality, mounting debt, and widespread frustration. Oil wealth still existed, but it no longer reached ordinary citizens the way it once had. Trust in institutions eroded. Faith in traditional parties collapsed. This is stage four, social fracture, and it creates an opening. In 1998, Hugo Chavez was elected president on a promise to break the old system. He spoke directly to those who felt excluded from the oil economy. He promised redistribution, sovereignty, and control over Venezuela's natural wealth. Oil prices soon surged again in the early 2000s. Once more, money flooded in. The government expanded spending dramatically, this time on social programs, subsidies, and state ownership. Poverty initially fell, support soared. To many, it felt like the good times had returned. But the underlying structure hadn't changed. Venezuela still depended almost entirely on oil. Domestic production outside energy remained weak. Currency controls tightened further. Private investment declined. The state assumed more responsibility without building resilience. This is the most dangerous moment in the pattern, because prosperity has returned, but the vulnerabilities are deeper than before. What happens when the money stops again? That question hangs over Venezuela at the end of this chapter. The system looks stable, oil is flowing, the bolivar still exists, but beneath the surface, the conditions for collapse are quietly aligning. What started as extraordinary wealth is becoming something far more fragile. And what comes next is where the pattern accelerates.